I remember watching my stepdad beat my mom. I was 5 years old, and I remember my mom saying, "Call the cops." And so I ratted out of Mobster at 5.
Forest Blakk is the popular music artist with over 18 million listeners in over 184 countries.
His song, Fall Into Me, has gone gold in the US.
I always meet every single person that wants to meet me. I always tell the audience I'm a fan before a band. I know what it's like for somebody to tell you something and for it to change your life.
Can we start with your dad?
Oh, man. I decided to take a leap of faith, and I tried finding my birth father. I called every single name in the phone book that I could that had his name in it, and eventually I reached him. And that's when he told me, "Well, your stepdad gave me 10 grams of coke and made me sign you over." I felt locked out and isolated by that person to the point where I was almost beyond repair. It shaped the whole course of my life.
Do you ever consider finding him and having this conversation with him? Forest Blakk, welcome to the Gent Talk
Thanks for
podcast.
having me here, man.
I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Me too.
On the way over, I was listening to your song, If You Love Her, and it evoked some pretty strong emotions in me. And you were saying right before we started recording that it has a different effect on different people.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see how some people take it, and it almost breaks them in a way. Whereas other people take it and it almost motivates them or pushes them in a direction to seek love. So it's been really interesting to seeing what I call the echo come back.
Well, you've had an interesting... I'm going to dive right into it. You've had an interesting...
Interesting is already an interesting word.
Yeah, exactly. You've had an interesting relationship with love.
Yeah.
I find I've had tons of conversations with different artists, and some of the things that I've learned from them was there are people out there in the music industry who will try to find difficult situations in their lives to try and create something from that, right? They'll go and they'll seek it out, and others who just have had things happen to them. When I was looking into your backstory, your origin story, we'll call it, I found an interview you did with Peoples, I think it was, where you talked about a long-term relationship that you were in, your relationship with Nana.
Yeah.
Your relationship with your fiance. Are you married now?
Married now, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And your relationship with your father. Those are all things that I really want to dive into with you, because I think it's such an interesting story to form the current version that's sitting in front of me. Can we start with your dad?
Yeah.
And listen, at any point, if there's anything you're like, Samir, I don't want to talk about that.
Listen, I think for me, it's been an ongoing process of trying to figure out how to start talking. You know, I feel like my whole career, I've made music about things I don't really know about. You know, a lot about love. I'm realizing as an adult that I didn't really know much about love growing up. And I think it was the antithesis of it that brought me to this place to want to discover it so much. I feel like I've been at sea my whole life, and I'm just trying to write songs about land. But I don't know what that looks like.
Right.
I didn't know what trees looked like. And my wife was like an island in the middle of the ocean that my boat landed on. And it was like, whoa. And all the things that I'd written about, I didn't fully know how to process when I saw it, because it was slightly different than what I had imagined. I think a lot of people do that. We have expectations, hopes, beliefs, dreams that we put up. And it's somewhat of a facade because we don't know any better. And again, when you run into it, you have to reinterpret it. It's like almost like learning a whole new language. So for me, growing up, I lacked all that. Like I said, I feel like I was lost at sea. And now I feel like I'm discovering land, and I'm learning all the textures of it, and I'm experiencing things differently. I feel like my feet are on solid ground for the first time, and that rocking is gone. And I don't know what to do with it. And there's also a weird part of that, because the lack of love was something I'm so comfortable with. Love is the foreigner. So I'm having to have a whole new world play out in front of me. And again, I'm having to try and process every single day. And it's complicated, because I'm very comfortable. I think like a lot of people with trauma, I'm very comfortable with pain. I know those feelings so well. Like those, I can deal with things that people can't deal with. I've always been able to do that. But when it comes to normal things that are typically great, I've struggled with. So the starting point is dad. It's a really big word.
Yeah.
Or lack thereof.
Well, in the article or in the interview with people, you said he sold you for 10 grams of coke.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that wasn't an easy pill to swallow. So my stepdad is the one who bought me. My birth father, I don't really have anything to do with him. I don't know him. Like, I met him a couple times, and it was hard because when I was about 15 or 14 maybe, well, let me backtrack a little bit. When I was 12, my stepdad got arrested and was put in jail. And my mom wasn't equipped or mature enough to deal with having 3 kids and a gangster for a husband in prison. So life got really hard real quick. It was already hard, but then it was like the house of cards fell.
Right.
You know, the big gust of wind came through. And so I was alone. I was very scared. I didn't really know what to do. I was coming into being a man, a young man, and I'm already hardened without realizing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that shell is fortifying, and I have no clue that's happening. And so I start trying to figure out what I need to do with all these feelings that I have, and there's no one around to talk to about them. There never has been. And so I decided to take a leap of faith, and I tried finding my birth father, who I didn't know. I knew nothing about him. All I knew was that I carried a name that wasn't the same as my brother and my sister, and I was made very well aware of that as a child.
So you felt different right from the beginning?
Right from the beginning. From a very young age, I felt very different. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. It's so heavy and so loaded, and I don't know if we have enough to fit it into an hour, but to predate even that, I remember watching my stepdad beat my mom. I was 5 years old, and I remember my mom saying, "Call the cops." And I remember my stepdad, who the person I called dad, a mobster, telling me not to. And I chose my mom. And so I ratted out a mobster at 5. And I was made to pay for that my whole life. And I had no clue that was happening. So fast forward, I was made to pay for the fact that I wasn't his. I was made very well aware that I was the rat. And so I started a lifelong journey of trying to earn affirmation and love that never came in. And I risked my life for it. And I'm very frustrated about that.
Still?
Yeah. The older I get, it's a complicated thing. The more I forgive my mom, I don't have a relationship with either or, but I forgive her completely. I am older than she was when this was happening. And so I struggle to take care of my dog. So I can't imagine what it was like for her being an uneducated woman, born to a poor family, out in the world trying to compete and be a normal person while you have a mobster as a husband and a piece of work as a husband. So I don't hold any resent or anger towards her. I'm hurt, and that's about it. But I have to have this buffer, this barrier now, because I don't know how to relate to her. I've grown way beyond her, and I don't understand how to go back. It's too dangerous for me. But with my dad, it's a struggle because I feel like if I ever saw him in public, I don't know how I would hold back, because I'm a man now, and I can carry myself. And I'm very scared of it. It's a feeling I'm very afraid of.
You're not that little boy who couldn't help himself.
Yeah, but that boy's stuck inside. And I see him. We're two people. I'm the thing that came out to protect him, but I grew up into the adult. The boy's in there hiding. And I'm working every day to work through that and work through talking to him and having him come out. Because I need to be calm and gentle and docile. That's what I'm trying to project into the world. And it's taken a long time to get there. So fast forward. Again, I don't remember how old I was, between 13 and 15. And I take the leap of faith to try and find my birth father because I know nothing about him. All I know is that my mom would tell me he was gay, and she would tell me all these crazy things. I was like, "Why? Who cares? Why are you telling me this about him?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe is it to keep me away from him or make me not like him or what have you?" And so I called every single name in the phone book that I could that had his name in it. And eventually I reached him. And I asked if I can go see him, and he told me no. And so it was like a gut shot. I was knocked out from that one.
Yeah. I can only imagine.
Yeah, it sucked. 2 shitty dads.
Yeah.
And so he said, "You can call me when you're 18. And so I did. And there's a crazy story about this. I went from, I bounced on and off the streets as a kid and, different houses and always trying to find places to crash. I wasn't homeless and like the living in a dumpster homeless. It was just no real home. And so my Nana took me in when I was 15. And she's like, you need to go to school and you need to get a job. So I went and worked at this little French fry place called La Belle Province in Montreal. And I was there for maybe like 6 months. And I was flipping burgers and fries every day. And there was a big bay window, the size of like maybe 2 big giant trucks. Like big. And the only thing that you'd see outside the bay window was like a giant brick wall. There was a highway to the right. And there was one house in the middle. This little tiny house. And so when I reached out to my birth father when I was 18, and he said, okay, you can come. That was the house he lived in. So it meant I would have spent 6 months staring at the house that my birth father was living in.
Wow.
While serving fries as a really messed up kid, trying to get my head out of the weeds. And so it was there when I met him, when I had those questions of like, why couldn't I talk to you? Because it's a struggle to feel like you're not worth something, that you're not good enough to be picked by somebody who gave birth, like who made you. Yeah. So it's like I had all these fundamental questions about why am I not good enough?
What's wrong with me?
Yeah. And that's when he told me, well, your stepdad gave me 10 grams of coke and made me sign you over and told me I wasn't allowed to talk to you till I was 18. And I was like, whoa, that makes sense, you know?
You don't have a relationship now with either?
No, I haven't talked to my stepdad in 20 years. I have nothing to say to him. If he sees this anywhere, like, go fuck yourself. go learn something. Do better. It's not my job to come and make his life better. It never will be. And I think I don't say that with malice or even anger, actually. It's an honest statement. I think a lot of people feel like they're responsible for other people's actions when they're not. I'm responsible for mine. My debts are owed to the people I've hurt. My debts are owed to the people I've made mistakes with. But I don't owe him anything. He owes the world for the debts and the mistakes that he's made with raising kids. He was terrible. He ruined my life. He ruined my brother's life. He created an angry person. He created a drug addict. And he ruined every beautiful sparkle that my little sister had. That's what he gave us. In his pursuit of riches, he forgot the gems that laid right in front of him. And that breaks my heart for him. Because I can't imagine what it would be like to be the father, staring at your son who's now on podcasts and TV shows, whose music has reached almost 1 billion people. You must really feel like you lost. And it's a tragedy. So if you're a father out there listening to this and you feel like you're doing a shit job, change course. The beautiful thing about being lost at sea is that a slight change in direction changes everything on your course. A millimeter can bring you to a whole new destination, 100,000 miles away from where you started. But if you're my father, I feel you're capsized. Your ship's done. There's no recourse. You can't turn that around.
How's the relationship with your siblings?
It's an evolution. I don't have contact with my little brother. My little brother became a drug addict and is holding a lot of pain. I think the same pain that I had, but for me, it never manifested in drugs.
What makes you different?
I don't know. It's a question I have a lot of times where I'm like, how can I reach him? And I don't know how. I always thought that if I made it in life, if I became rich or successful, then I would have all the tools to go and solve that. But I don't think it can. It's just sometimes damage does its work, and then that's where you are. And again, like the same way my brother couldn't convince me to put my fists down as a teenager, same way I can't convince him to put the drugs down. It's something that he has to find within himself.
Are your fists down now?
Yeah, for a long time.
How did you get there?
I didn't like who I became. It took me a long time to figure that part out. Like especially into my like mid-20s, I felt really lost. I felt like I was becoming like my father. And I hated that because you hear that. You hear from a lot of people like, oh, be careful, you turn into the thing you hate the most. Yeah. And I really started to see that in the mirror. You know, the thing about being the son of a mobster is that there is a charm and a charisma in those people that is wild, and it's incredible to see. If they would have used it. Pardon?
Hooks you in.
Oh, yeah, immediately.
Yeah.
They learn that you want love, is really what I think it really boils down to. And they learn that you'll do anything for it. And so as long as they don't say the words, I love you, you'll keep doing anything you need to do for it. So I carry some of that, I think naturally. You know, if you're the son of a carpenter, you're probably going to be good with wood. You know, if you're the son of a mechanic, you'll probably like engines. So for me, seeing that power as a young child, it did something to me. And so I've always had an interesting relationship with that part of me. But again, my father on the other side of that coin would use that power in ways that would affect people tragically. He ruined people's lives. And so I never wanted to become that. And I always had something slightly different about me than him. I didn't have that thing that wanted to push over the edge. I cared too much. And I think you're not really good at being a mobster if you have a little bit of empathy in your heart. So the course that my stepdad set me on was a course I couldn't live into. And that's when my life changed. And I made a decision. It was either time to really tune into that part of life and become that big, angry, gangster to be who would probably be dead or in jail by now, or leave and never come back. And I left and I never came back. And then music found me on the way out.
Where does Nana come into all of this?
So my Nana is my stepdad's stepmom. No blood. She is the kindest, challenging, encouraging, she's the most incredible woman I've ever met in my life, next to my wife. Those two are my queens. My Nana took me in. I had nowhere to go. I was in Ottawa. I was trying to forge a relationship. My dad had just gotten out of jail. I was trying to connect with him, and the games were starting, and I had nowhere to go. It was a pretty scary time. And so I called her. I said, "Can I come live with you?"
How old were you?
16, 15.
Okay.
And she said, "Yeah." And so I grabbed a train from Ottawa to Montreal. I had 2 garbage bags and a backpack, and she let me come live with her. And so she owed me nothing. My grandfather had passed a few years before. She was just trying to figure out her life, I think. And so she invited me into her home and let me live there. And it was an interesting thing because she didn't parent me. She didn't helicopter parent me. There weren't these triumphant moments of wisdom that were passed down. It was more quiet. It wasn't chaos for the first time in my whole entire life, so I could rest my head at night and feel like at least a human for a minute. And I started processing things, and maybe not so much at times as well.
Have you had this conversation with her as you got older?
Yeah, we talk a lot about it. She always calls me intense, which I've learned to take as a compliment. Because I think deeply, and I think for her it's slightly confusing to see how I think. I think all of this is very confusing for her because, she brought me into her home, and I think for her she wanted me to become a doctor or a lawyer, like the classic things that your parents or the people who care about you want you to do.
Sounds like in her mind it was just how do we course correct and give you just something stable.
Yeah, just something to keep me on the right path. Yeah. And music was never an option. There was no music around me. There was nobody musical in my life.
Mm-hmm.
This is a whole accident. She bought me a gift on a whim. It was a guitar. And she had no clue that this would do this to me. Neither did I. It scared the shit out of me when I got that guitar.
Why?
I can't fully explain it because it's something that's... I don't understand it myself, but I picked up this guitar and I strummed it, and it felt like I was throwing up. Like emotions. It felt like something in that was always connected to something inside of me, and that opens a door somewhere in the world for my brain, my soul. For the first time, I had a 300-foot view of an emotion. I'd never experienced that before. I think I was always locked in place, ready to protect and defend myself. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's, whatever you want to call it, God, a muse, life, the universe, I don't know. I don't know what it is, the source. But something punched a hole through, and it was like I heard stuff in my head that I'd never heard before, and it felt like vomit. It felt like it was so visceral. It was like gut-wrenching, and I started to cry. And I remember putting the guitar down, being like, what the fuck is that? And it scared me, and I couldn't touch the guitar very often. Every now and then I'd pick it up, and I would start learning what that was, I guess. And over time, that developed into me feeling confident enough to just make stuff up on the spot. So I'd always freestyle. That's how I write music. I let it all come out, and then I go look at it after and go, what is it trying to tell me? And I'm an editor of whatever that is, downloading into me. So again, for her to get me that gift, it shaped the whole course of my life. Like I said, with the course that any father out there or parent or anyone listening to this, even a spouse, it doesn't matter. If you are still at sea, even if you're lost, all you have to do is course correct a little bit. Everyone thinks they have to like hard turn. This ain't black ice. Just an inch. Change course. You will end up at a completely different destination. And that for me was the starting point. It just kicked my ship to the right just a little bit. And all of a sudden it was a whole different world ahead of me.
Incredible how something seemingly so random can alter your entire life.
Yeah.
You said she bought it on a whim.
Yeah, she came to me. She goes, I just want to get you a gift. What can I get you? And I didn't know how to answer the question. I love telling the story to people. When I was 5 years old, my Uncle David came to my house and he opened up one of those toy catalog books and he goes, I want to get you something. And I remember there was a black acoustic guitar and there was an electric guitar with a mic. And I was like, oh, there's two things. I was like 5. So I was like, I want the two things.
Yeah, of course.
So he bought it for me. And I remember like in the first 2 minutes it broke. I was always like, oh. So at like 15, to have that question being asked to me, I hadn't had that question asked to me.
Sounds like you weren't asked at all for a long time.
No, I wasn't allowed to have birthdays growing up. My mom would have to wake me up at midnight to sneak me into a kitchen where she'd hid a piece of cake in the back of the freezer and a couple hockey card holders that were worth 10 cents to give to me, and I had to go back to my room and hide. That was my life. So it's not that it was all terrible. There were moments, but there were a lot of heavy things that most people wouldn't be able to deal with.
Yeah.
And so again, that fast forward to have someone going, I want to get you something. All my brain did was just don't get me the thing with two things because it'll break. Get me the one, just the guitar. It was the only answer I had. I just didn't know how to ask for anything.
Yeah.
And so again, that one little thing, she had no clue.
Is your relationship with your Nana your first encounter with love?
Yeah, I would say so.
What did that teach you?
Well, it wasn't love in the conventional sense. I understand it to be love completely and wholeheartedly. But it wasn't like that coddled love. It was almost, and maybe this is being a man. Not that I like to label things and put them in those boxes, but I think for a lot of men, or masculinity, respect equates to love. And my Nana respected me. And she spoke with respect to me and commanded that respect. So I respected her. And to me, with hindsight now, fast forward, umpteen years, that was love. I listened to everything she said. I trusted her. And so if you were to break down the components of love, if love is the engine or the vehicle, what are the parts? Trust, respect, kindness, patience.
Kindness is a big one.
Massive.
Especially in given your story growing up and the lack of.
Yeah, certainly not very much kindness going on.
Yeah.
So she was the first experience of those pieces, and I didn't know it. I didn't understand it. But it wasn't this coddling, hugging, and kissing. I love you. Oh my God. But it was something way deeper, and I just didn't understand it at the time.
Yeah.
And so
it's like a beautiful natural thing that just brought you two together and happened.
Yeah.
And that thread seems to weave through the course of your life. It still carries with you, is the sense that I get. Correct me if I'm wrong. But.
No, I think you're right. I think, using that analogy about, being a boat at sea, my Nana, she was a dock. My feet were still wobbly from underneath of me. There's too much happening around that she could never solve. It was never hers to solve either. But she was a place where it felt like my boat wasn't adrift any longer.
Yeah.
And that was a whole new feeling as well. There was a constant for a moment. And that was like, whoa, there's something stable to a degree.
Yeah.
And she's, look, I get to drive to Montreal and play a show to 3,000 people with my Nana in the audience. What a trip. It makes me emotional. Like, wow.
I bet.
It's crazy, man.
Yeah.
The failure to a stage. Wow. Like,
do you still see yourself do you still see that version of you as a failure?
No, failure isn't an outcome, but it's a moment. And so failure is an idea. It's not the epitome of one's existence. Failure is just, it's a moment in time. I was the failure.
It's a good way of checking the ego.
Yeah. I'm proud of it. I'm proud that I exist the way I do. I'm proud that I have the mind that I have and the heart that I have. I'm not proud of the things that came about in between getting here. There's a lot of things I hold a lot of shame in, and things that I think about regularly, and a lot of...
Ask like what?
There are people out there in my life who I've fought and sent back to their mothers looking like different people as a consequence of the world I was born into and the world that they grew up in as well. I don't feel good about that. I wish I could go back in time with the love and kindness that I have now, and the nurturing and the wisdom that I've taught myself over the years through life. I wish I could remove the things that hardened me, that caused me to travel in the world with armor on, because it affected people. There are conversations I've had with people in my life where I didn't know how to be tactful or soft. I was speaking to normal people in the way that I knew how to speak. I didn't have the language yet. I hadn't learned it. I was speaking through the language of mob and gangs and violence, not through kindness, love, and patience and acceptance. And so for me, I'm very aware that I can't go back. The consequence of life and the consequence of the actions that you have, for me at least, lay inside the way those people carry you for the rest of their lives. And there's nothing I can do to fix that.
I've always struggled with that concept of knowing that in some person's life out there, I am the villain in that story.
100%.
When the current version of me would strive to do nothing but just be kind.
Yeah.
And when you look back on that version of yourself and you almost shiver a little bit, it's, I mean, internally a reinforcement of that's not who you are today, but it's still, man, if only I could have that conversation, if only I could undo, so I'm not the villain.
Yeah, a therapist once told me that when you're climbing through your world of growth, the thing to be mindful about is that the air becomes thin and a lot less people are up there.
Yeah.
She said, you have to be mindful that not everyone's on the same trajectory, not everyone's growing in the same place. And that's not a way of saying anyone's better or worse. We're just on different levels or steps of our progression. And so I can forgive those who have hurt me. I'm in that place. But I have to accept the fact that other people may not be there yet. And they don't need to be. That's their journey. And I have to accept that. But you're right. Like, it does suck. I'll have 1,000 people share a post and say how kind I am and how much it means to them that I connect with them the way that I do. But there'll be one person out there who goes, oh, that guy's an asshole. I met him when he was 15 and he said stuff to me that I can't forget. And I hate that.
Yeah.
But then again, those experiences I hold, and maybe those people, there's the other side of it, maybe they actually don't think about me. Maybe it's only me thinking about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think about it.
Does it make you feel like a phony?
No. Maybe for a minute it did. Maybe for a minute there was a bit more of an imposter syndrome. Now it's more, I have grace. If I've hurt somebody, I could sit here and have a conversation with them. And I can accept what I've ever done to anybody. Yeah. And I don't need their forgiveness. I would love it, but it doesn't change the way I'm going to travel in the world. I'm working on not hardening it anymore. I'm working on not putting the armor back on.
How much of that armor is off?
Whew. I don't know.
I mean, you've been pretty forthcoming with a guy you just met 5 minutes before we started recording.
Yeah, if not for this, then for what? What's it all worth? If you're going to say your story, say it or don't say it. Agreed. Yeah. So that's the truth. I think, part of being an entertainer and a professional musician and going out on stages is that's what I do now. It's the whole thing. It's not to play martyr, but it's to be honest. Right. I can sit here and say, this is what's happened. This is what has not felt right. This is where I'm at.
So how much do you think is off at this point?
Again, I don't know. I feel like...
Does something trigger you where you then suddenly close back up?
I don't think I'm at a place where I'll close back up, but I don't know. There are experiences that I haven't had. I don't know how I'm going to be when I lose my Nana. I don't know what that's going to do to my world, if it's going to shatter me or if it's going to encourage me. I like to think that I'm fortified. I'm thinking already in those terms. I like to think that when that day comes, I'll be a better version of myself and carry myself with grace. You know, I like to think that every day I spend with my wife and every day that I get to love her and she loves me is a day that more and more armor comes off. I think the thing about it is I don't know how much is there to begin with. What I know is that I've had multiple revelations in my life that have revealed that there was armor on. And that's been at times shocking. It's been very confrontational.
I bet. I mean, you mentioned earlier how the events of your childhood forced this armor on that you didn't even know was happening.
Yeah.
Just constantly hardening around you.
Yeah, when you're a kid, what you think is normal. You know, like I was in the first grade, I think it was, and my dad had beat me so badly with a fishing rod that I couldn't sit down in class. And so the teachers kept getting upset with me, telling me to sit down, and I didn't want to rat him out again. And so eventually they carried me to the principal's office where it was revealed that I had these welts across my body. And then they called Child Protective Services, and my stepdad fled with my family to Florida for 2 years to evade them. It's like, wow. I don't, a kid doesn't know how to process that because that's my dad.
That's supposed to be your hero. That's
supposed to be my hero. And I looked up to him. Most people don't have the experiences. Most people aren't driving to the Laurentian Mountains in Quebec, and a guy is, you know, tailing them too closely, and then my dad and that guy are getting in a car grudge, and all of a sudden we're at the side of a road, and my dad pulls a gun out as this man's coming to confront him, and he puts the gun to his head, and I watch a man beg for his life. Most people don't know how to deal with that. I didn't know how to deal with that. That was dad.
Wow.
That's what I saw. So I understand that I was hardened. I understand now, but it's taken a long time to get there. It's taken a long time to process it. And I think the thing is, as I go through this, and the more I talk about it, the more I sit with professional people and talk about it, the more I'm trying to understand my own story, the more I'm understanding there's a lot more stories in there. There are things that I never believed people could black things out, but now I do. Because the more I speak about it, I'm like, oh yeah, that story. And I'm realizing that those are my conventional stories. Those are like, you know, oh yeah, we went to Lewis's pool party, and I remember that. Like these are my versions of that. They're my normals, but my normals were very chaotic. It's like being in a war-riddled country or anything. Like when that becomes your normal, you're almost shell-shocked. And so, you know, I have to learn about mental health. I have to learn about PTSD. I have to learn about bipolar disorder. I have to learn about depression and mania. And like, I have to reach to the depths of me to figure out how to correct all these things that have happened. So again, going back to that boat analogy, it's that like, there are holes that have been plugged in it. And I've grown up knowing that I just have to keep getting water out the boat. I didn't even know I had to plug the holes. I didn't know I knew how to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm learning that now. And I don't know when that stops. So when you say how much armor is on there, it's like asking me how many holes are in the boat. I don't know. I just know there's still water in it. But there's less than there used to be.
What an incredible journey you're on.
Yeah.
And I say on present tense because, to your point, it's still happening.
Yeah. I mean, 5 years ago, I was homeless in a car in Los Angeles again. So yeah, it's, you know.
What was that story?
I came home to an ex who was falling in love with somebody else. I was living in Germany, and I was out of money. I just finished recording my second album. I'm signed to the biggest record label on the planet. Life's looking good. I just finished playing Red Rocks, but I was broke. And all my time was going into this career to build, and my ex and I had planned to get married, and it was like, okay, we're doing this, but all my time and energy was in trying to make things work. And I wasn't paying attention to where she was. I wasn't paying attention to our story, our love, and that's on me. So I you know, if anyone hears this, it's not on her. But she fell for somebody else in the midst of that. Somebody from Toronto. She was in Germany. And I came home. I was out here in Niagara Falls trying to take care of my brother for a minute, trying to at least connect and see if I could attach to his mind and help him out. And while I was over here, I got a phone call from her being like, yeah, I don't know. I was like, wait a second. I live in Europe with you. It's not something you just don't know anymore.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a really tough moment. So I flew back to Germany. And again, I was out of money. I think I had $300 in my pocket. And she's like, yeah, you know, I don't think this is going to work. We can't do this. And I was like, what the hell you want me to do? Like, you know, like, I've never known there was even a problem. I didn't even know there was anything to fix. And she's like, well, yeah, there were. And so you didn't figure it out. And so next thing you know, I'm on a plane flying to Los Angeles. I call my record label, say, hey, I'm going to go write some songs. Can you rent me a car? You know, and they're like, yeah, we can get you a car. I was like, sweet. And I didn't tell them that I had nowhere to go. I didn't know anybody really, and so I ended up in Los Angeles, living in the back of a rental car with a bag, a guitar, and a busted heart, just hoping that my ex would take me back. And she didn't. So the next 8 months of my life were bouncing around from couches and therapy sessions and the Pacific Coast Highway, staring out at the ocean, hoping my life would change. And I didn't know it then, but life was changing, you know. It was pretty wild.
What was the biggest change?
I wrote a hit song. And I had no clue. That was massive. I think, but the biggest thing, to be honest, is my wife. So I did all this therapy. I put myself through like hell and back to just try and connect with myself. I started learning more about myself, learning about what was going on. I was trying some hocus pocus stuff in LA, like as you do in LA. I was doing breathwork classes, and I'm like, man, I'm such
With all the other actors.
That's it, dude. Funny story enough. Yeah, man. I was trying to find the breathwork place on the first day, and I'm walking next to this guy, and I'm like, man, this guy looks familiar. And it was one of the hobbits from Lord of the Rings.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And it's the twins, the dudes.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh my God, this is a trip. And so next thing you know, I'm in this breathwork class, and it's like a meditation thing, I guess. And, you know, if anybody sees me, I'm covered in tattoos, and like
you don't look like a guy that goes.
No, not at all, man. And even still, like, I have my limits with it. But anyway, I was confronting a lot of stuff. You know, I was like going in and like actually deep diving in with the trauma, and like I was in this meditative breathwork class where it's just you're breathing and then meditating, and the guy who's running this thing is like, hey, I want you to go back to the last time you were happy. And in my mind, I don't know if it's just the way I process visually and mentally about stuff with being an artist, but it was like a Rolodex of memories flipped through my mind, and it wouldn't stop. And then it stopped. And all of a sudden, I was staring at this kid at the back of his head. He was on a big wheel flying down the street, and his hair was in slow motion, waving from right to left. And then I can't really make him out. It was almost like there was like a plastic film in front of me. It was a little bit like diffused. Like I couldn't make out the image, but then it dawned on me, like that was me. I was happy, and I get emotional talking about it. It was the last time I felt happiness, and that was a really challenging thing to confront. It's like, oh, that was the end of my childhood, was that day, and I snapped out of it, and I was a wreck. Like just like right now, I can go back to that place. There's a powerful tool to be able to look at, because I was like, oh my God, I've been like completely not present for like 30 years.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm curious about the willingness to do all of this, because you had every excuse in the book to say, woe is me, life sucks, fuck it, I'm out. But there seems to be this consistent awareness of I need to do something to make me better. Where does that come from?
I don't know. Why do people climb Mount Everest? I don't know. It's just for the view for 10 seconds. You gotta climb back down, and you gotta pass dead bodies on the way up and on the way down, and you know that the whole time. I don't know if it's the same thing that's in me. It just or maybe I don't feel like I've ever been able to reach me. I'm in self-discovery mode, you know. So it's like when you know your full potential and it's not being reached, that's on you. I don't know my potential. I don't even know what that is. Like there are no boundaries in there. So I'm testing all the time, you know, and I'm addicted to the feeling of getting better. I'm addicted to the feeling of figuring things out. I'm addicted to the feeling of processing. You know, I love it's like songwriting. There's a writer named Dorothy Parker, and somehow at some point in time somebody asked her, you know, what is it that you love writing or whatnot, and and I'm paraphrasing terribly, but she says, I hate writing. This is a very successful writer. She goes, I love having written. And that's how I feel. Writing a song is like awful. Writing poetry is awful. But I'm so addicted to reading the outcome of it. I'm so connected and attached to watching a song go out in the world and feeling like I did my muse service. Like I honored that thing. It's the one thing that's never left me. and I call her, but I served her. And then all of a sudden, there's something out in the world, and I've been telling people it's an echo. I feel like I've been climbing this mountain, and I felt alone all my life. And at some point, I started singing and, yelling my words out. And at one point in time, I heard it come back to me, but it wasn't my voice. And now I'm in a place where I hear thousands of them a day, and it comes back to me.
Does it concern you or worry you when you think, I went from having nobody to suddenly having thousands of people sing with me, scream my name, follow me? Or you've gone to the other side of that spectrum?
No, because to me it looks like one entity. It's a nameless thing. It's a faceless thing. It's a relationship with an energy. So it doesn't go to my head. I don't know how to process it quite fully. But to me, the relationship with my wife, the relationship with the couple people around me, that's where I really feel different. But with everybody else, it's like, I don't know, it's like being in servitude almost. Like every night I do these acoustic shows at the end of the concert. I go out into a parking lot, and whoever wants to come out, I'll play a couple songs. I always meet every single person that wants to meet me. I always tell the audience I'm a fan before a band. I know what it's like for somebody to tell you something and for it to change your life. So my currency is time. I trade it. They give me their time. They listen to my music. They listen to my 3 minutes and 30 seconds hundreds of millions of times. So I'm eternally in debt to them. So I stand outside and I do my extra 2 hours every night, and I meet every single person I can. I hear every single story. I'm the last to leave. And that makes me feel something very special. But again, it's big, but it's a nameless, faceless thing. It's the ability to provide something. It's to give people what I've always looked for. So I'm very aware that the immediacy of it is very selfish. And I don't want anyone to take any, I don't want there to be any misunderstanding or misconceptions. It is always selfish first, because I feel seen. But the selflessness, I think, that births from selfishness is that they too feel seen. And that to me breeds a community that I've always dreamed of having. I didn't have much for friends. I didn't have much for real family growing up. And I feel like this entity is my family. So it's not what I imagined. It's not what I've seen as a child, but it's what I have, and I love it. And I genuinely love it. So every single story and every person you meet, I can hear the worst shit you have inside your heart, and I will be the person who can hear it and be okay with it. And I feel like that's a gift that comes from my birth, my life, that not many people can have. I've sat with therapists who don't know how to hear the things inside my heart, but I know how to, and I have room. I have this endless nuclear room to hear the worst of the worst and still love you through it. The trade-off is I just don't have to love my dad. And that's a very complicated thing, but it's true.
Do you ever ask yourself, do you ever consider finding him and having this conversation with him? It's a hard no.
Yeah, and it's not for a lack of the ability to.
Are you worried?
No, I used to be. Sometimes you have to ask yourself what the boundary is, and you really have to respect that boundary. And so the thing is, I felt locked out and isolated by that person to the point where I was almost beyond repair. And so it is not my responsibility to invite them back. And I think in any normal circumstance, let's say, if my dad was just an alcoholic or not the best person, sure, it's a different thing. But I don't know how to better explain this, so bear with me as I say this.
Sure.
It's like finding out your dad's a serial killer and that they almost killed you. Do you have to have a conversation to know how you feel? It's kind of, I don't know how else to explain it.
Yeah.
The complication is that what I have built beyond him is far beyond him, and he is not owed anything, and I will never give him an ounce of it. He stole everything from us, and so he doesn't deserve that. And so it's not for a lack of empathy. I have empathy. I hope he finds what he's been looking for his whole life. But I certainly know that it was never me, and it was never my mother, and it was never my brother, and it was never my sister. So whatever it is that he's seeking, I hope he finds it. And I hope that whatever confrontations he has to have as an older dying man, he'll have to have that confrontation with himself. I hope that he finds that as well. But I've made my peace. I hope he has as well. But that's about it, the extent of it.
Yeah.
I know it's a complicated thing, and I know it's a very heavy thing. But when people do those things to you, it's okay to not have to owe them. Give that energy to people who actually want to come around. But I can tell you, in 20 plus years, he's not the one. He's never wanted to be around either. And frankly, I don't want him around. So
when you talk about finding peace, it sounds like you found that in your wife.
Yeah, I would say so. To a degree. I'm like, I mean, sometimes I'm maybe a little bit more chaotic. She brings me a lot of peace.
Yeah.
And I think peace is a really interesting synonym for perspective. The thing I love about my wife more than anything is I love the lens that I get to look through with her in front of me. I get to see the world through her lenses. I get to hear how she interprets things and how communication affects her. I get to learn about how I can be better as a man, as her partner, as a person, how I can nurture the femininity in me as much as the masculinity in me, how I can balance. She brings, I always describe her when people talk to her about her to me, or when I try to talk about her to people, I'm like, she is the place where sunsets and sunrises meet. She's the improbable. You know, my biggest gripe now is the fact that I won't live long enough to be here forever, and I'm very frustrated about that. Like, I wish I could live an eternity with her and then some. And so that's my biggest... I used to never be afraid of dying. This is another revelation for me. This is like, you know, the armor coming off. I never thought that getting married would do anything. You know, I never thought like I would feel anything different. You know, but I could tell you this, the day I said I do, something changed. I was like, oh, she's first, not me anymore. Like, it's the first time in my life I put someone before me. And it's like I would take every piece of armor I have off of my body and put myself in the line of any fire to make sure she was okay. And I've never experienced that before. I've always protected me above anybody and anyone. So for her, she's the fuel to my existence at this point. And I don't mean that in a codependent way. I am enamored by her. I am in awe of her. I can't tell anybody how much I love her. It would take 1,000,000 times 1,000,000 songs to try and figure out how to even scratch the surface of how I feel. You know, watching her and come into my life, man, it was like, yeah, I saw nothing until I saw her.
How long have you been together?
5 years.
What's the biggest lesson you've learned from those 5 years?
Love. Solid ground. Like, there's a whole other world.
Changes a man.
Oh my God, yeah. I became a man. I never thought I would find anything like this. So there's a lot. I'm sure if I sat and thought about this for days on end, I would have a lot of different answers for you. But the things that come to mind right away are just that. And to see a kid like me grow into an adult and write these songs and sing about her and then get on stages. It's like even last night we played History in Toronto. I'm here opening for James Arthur, which is crazy in itself. And I do that outside concert after the show. So I've played my set. James has played his set. I come out, I'm doing this thing. And my wife and I are standing in a circle, and there's a couple hundred people around us in a big giant circle, and we're singing our song to each other. And the thing that's really powerful is watching other people believe in love. Every night fans will message me saying, man, dude, I really was kind of done with love, and all of a sudden I'm feeling some stuff. And I'm like, oh man, like, it's spreading. That's pretty cool.
It's the best kind of message to spread.
Yeah, especially because it's lived. It's not like it's spoken or said. We're not telling the audience feel more love.
Yeah.
It's just her. I just love her. She loves me. It's really special. And it's, I think another thing, you know, especially for people listening to this, because people roll their eyes at this kind of stuff. I know I used to be one of them. But I was having a conversation with a friend of mine in Nashville, who's always looking for love in the wrong places and finding the wrong types of guys. And I said, well, why are you always looking for flames and sparks? It's such a waste of time. Like, and she's like, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, flames get knocked out by wind, and sparks are a fleeting moment. They're pretty. It's fun to look at. But I'm like, if you're really looking for love, look for the coals. Find your coals. Get those real red and hot. Start the fire. Let the sparks be the start. Let the flames burn, but make sure you have coals in the base. You want those to be nice and toasty. And she's like, well, what do you mean by that? I'm like, because those hold. If you think about it as love, the sparks and the flame, that's the immediacy. It's lust, really. It's like, you caught me.
The honeymoon phase.
Yeah. But the coals are real love. Because the coals aren't pretty. You know? But it is a bit mesmerizing if you actually look at it. But the thing is, if you take anything and put it on top of those coals, it immediately lights up. So I'm like, that's love to me. The kind gesture you say to your husband or your wife in the morning, or your partner or your person or your family member, that's something that you put on the coals. It can light up. And the thing with coals is they can go a really long time without having anything on it. Mm-hmm. They're stable. Wind can't knock them out. You know, a downpour is going to do its damage, but for the most part, they can still last. Mm. Even with, you pour a bunch of water on it, man, it takes a long time to put them out. Anyone who's been camping knows that. So it's like, all you have to do is serve the coals, not the flames, not the sparks. And I think that's a big thing that people get wrong. I know I did for a very long time. Yeah. And so now I get to say that on stage every night and tell that story. And then it feels pretty cool to see people connecting with it.
I bet.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that feeling of being able to share this journey and this message and have it reciprocated at that volume.
Yeah.
That many people. Like, as you were talking, I was just picturing outside of a concert, you, your wife, a couple hundred fans, just sort of together in the moment.
Yeah.
And how beautiful and impactful that must be.
It's unreal. And then when that's done, they all line up in a very long line, and we give big hugs to each person that comes through. We take pictures.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Dude, when I was 17 years old, I worked up in Mont Tremblant. I was a doorman, knocking heads and working for some rough people. And at the time, I'd had like a little tape cassette where I'd sang a thing on it. And I was pretty enamored with bands. I didn't really have much music to listen to as a kid, so this was like, they're really important for me. I was like, I really like this. And I was in angst. And so at this bar, though, there was a band called Cold. I would always sing their songs at the bar before the bar opened. And like a couple people on the mountain would know that. Yeah. And so one night, the doorman from the adjacent bar comes over and he's like, Forrest, we know that you really love singing and stuff, but there's a band at the other bar. And it's a band called I Mother Earth from Canada. And they're like a small, medium band, like you know, I think a bunch of people would know them, but not everybody. Yeah. But I did know them, and I was like, whoa. You know, it was like Our Lady Peace and I Mother Earth. And I was like, damn, that's so cool. And so I went to the bar, and there was these two guys, Brian and Bruce. And they wouldn't know anything about this, I'm sure. I know how it is now. Like, I'm sure they don't remember it. But I went over there, and again, I was like 17 years old. It was really a rough time in my life. And I was like, I went and talked to them, and I was like, hey, you guys are musicians. And I was like, can I get you my tape with me singing on it? Yeah. And they're like, sure, kid. And so I raced down the mountain, got in this car, raced to this house. I had to get a cassette to put onto another cassette. I had to like find the spot, like record it, put tape on the cassette. Yeah. And then I brought it back, and it took me probably an hour, and I was freaking out. I was like, oh man, they're going to leave. And I can still remember like the adrenaline and the angst and like the nervousness. And sure enough, I got back to this bar, and they were there, and they'd waited. And so I couldn't tell you that they waited for me, but they were there.
They were there.
And so I came in, and I gave them the tape, and they gave me a few minutes of their time. And that was another impactful moment that changed my life. So I Mother Earth did that, and then Billy Talent did that for me. At a whole other story at a random Wolf Road Mall in Albany, New York, while they were opening for a band called Finger 11, and I bumped into them at the mall. The mall was empty. Yeah. And I was like, these guys look cool, man. I had the guy with the straight up hair. Yeah. And they just talked to me in the food court. There was nobody there. They talked to me for a few minutes. And what they didn't know about my life is like, I was wrapped in some really heavy shit and was starting to become a bad person. And these two moments were really impactful. Time has always been something I'm aware of as a currency. And the lack of having time given to me as a child was something I've always been really precious with when people do give it to me. I've always been aware. And so, again, with I Mother Earth, I never forgot that. With Billy Talent, I never forgot that. And so something I've always maintained is I don't care how big this gets. I will always trade time. I'll never be able to pay back the amount of time. If you take, I'm at, I think today, 940 million streams in the world. You times that by 3.5 minutes. That's what I owe the world. That's the exchange.
Incredible.
So that for me is what I'm doing. Every lineup, every person is the trade for that.
And to think you could have that kind of an impact on someone else who might be going through something.
Yeah.
Just by giving them that few extra minutes.
Yeah. Some humility, some kindness, the ability to listen to them. You make people feel seen.
And that's the most important thing, is feeling seen.
I think so. Because I know selfishly, first, I need it.
Yeah.
When I'm standing at the front of the line, I feel very seen by hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And then they feel seen. And then we feel seen. And that's a community I want to be in.
So I got to ask you, we've talked a lot about young Forest and how the man sitting in front of me today is a byproduct of the circumstances of your life as a child. From growing up in that home to having a mobster for a father to all of these different things that have happened in your life that sent you down a dark path, only to find yourself shifting your boat ever so slightly, but enough to get you to where you are today. If you were able to magically go back in time, you walk into a room, young Forrest is just sitting on a bed there. What would you say to him?
Oh man, I did this in breathwork. I don't know so much of what I would say to him, but I would definitely want to ask him some stuff. I'd have questions for him about how he sees the world. The thing I don't have is the ability to see through the lens of innocence. So I'm missing it, and I know that. And so selfishly, if I could go back and sit with him, I'd love to add that to my repertoire. Probably would have helped me figure out how to take the armor off a lot sooner, rather than protect him. And then for what I would say to him is that, you're going to get me with this one, that we're going to be okay, but it's going to take it's going to take some time. Yeah. Life, even though I had my dad and my mom and the way life went, the thing I've realized is that it's all, excuse me, it's
take your time.
It's all a relative experience. I write these spoken words, it's poetry, and there's one called Wildfire, and I write in it that the scars that we carry are ours, and to wear them like badges of honor. And I really believe that. I don't know what you've gone through. The thing about being interviewed is I don't have the chance to get to know you in the same depth that you get to know me, and it's the tragedy of moments like these, because I wish I could. I have lots of questions, but time doesn't give us that, nor does this platform. Every single person has the same stories. They're just in different languages, and the order of the words are slightly different. But there are wounds in you that you carry. There are scars that you carry. There are experiences that you carry. There's the tears that you carry. There's the laughs. There's the things about you that nobody knows and you're afraid to tell them. Those are there. And I have them too. So who am I to say anything? So it's not that my experience is a one-off. That's the beautiful thing about being connected to a lot of people. It's the beautiful thing about standing in lines. People tell you some real shit. And you're certainly not alone. And so you can't play this cat and mouse game of who's had it worse. So again, for me, that little version of me is locked up inside of me. And I was the thing that empowered him to take the beating. I could take it. He couldn't. And so, and it's a strange thing to express like this, but in a lot of ways, I feel like there's two of me. There's the version of me that's very protected, and I'm very protective of him. I'm learning to try and let go of that so that he can be at the controls more. But I feel like I'm the representation of those two people coming together now, merging. But I can take the beating, and I can also keep my heart there. They're both now together. And I don't know how to give up either or if I should, or if anything.
Yeah.
But that's who I am, and that's what I have. So again, I don't know if I would change anything, because it's a very complicated thing. The grass is always greener on the other side. This is my story, and it has empowered me to want to climb the Mount Everest of my life, or it's empowered me to not give up at sea. I feel like I have that same thing that a lot of people have when you hear those crazy stories of people who've been lost for a long time and are eventually found, you know, when you're the castaway, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at right now. Yeah.
Do you want to have children?
No. No, my therapist would tell you that's the terrible answer. My therapist said that people like me make the best parents.
I was literally going to. I mean, I'm not a therapist, but I was going to say you would make an excellent father.
Yeah, I think so.
I think you'd give a young child all of the things that you craved.
Yeah, but sometimes I think that's the wrong thing.
Potentially, yeah.
These
you
are
can
the
make
things
the
I'm
argument.
nervous about.
Yeah.
I think especially in today's day and age, the way the world looks, and my career is quite selfish. I would never want to be a place for a child to not feel like they had all of me. I think some people are really special in how they go about having children. Like, they want to be parents.
Yeah.
If I became a parent, then I would do what I need to do.
Sure.
I believe
that.
Yeah, I imagine it'd be the same thing as how I feel with my wife. I feel like I would probably find a continent more than an island. You know, I'm aware of that. But I do feel like the way I give myself to the world is very important to me. And I feel like that's where I'm best suited. But if you'd asked me this 20 years ago, I would have had a different answer. So I don't know where I'll be in 10 years from now.
Absolutely.
Quite frankly, I don't know where I'm at tomorrow.
Yeah.
So,
Forrest, thank you so much for sharing your time with me.
thank you for sharing yours with me.
Thank you for sharing your journey. I think the only word that it leaves me with, if I had to pick one, would be inspired. Because to hear you talk so eloquently about the challenges of your life, but then sit in front of me, a comfortable, confident man, saying, this is who I am, this is who I was, and this is who I want to become, it just inspires me to want to become better, be kinder, to express kindness to the random stranger on the street.
Please do. They need it.
No. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And the next time you're in Toronto, or I'm wherever you are.
Episode 2?
Episode 2. Absolutely.
I would love that.
Amazing. Forrest, thank you so much. Thank you for listening, everybody.